When Esperanza Morales discovered what 17-year-old Seraphina Blackwood was really hiding behind the locked doors of her penthouse bedroom, the tears wouldn't stop flowing. What she found that gray November afternoon would shake the foundations of one of Manhattan's most powerful families and reveal a truth so heartbreaking, it would change everything forever. The autumn wind howled through the glass canyons of Manhattan's Upper East Side, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwood penthouse on Fifth Avenue. 43 floors above the bustling streets, the silence inside the opulent apartment was deafening, broken only by the soft tick of an antique grandfather clock that had belonged to the Blackwood family for generations. Victoria Blackwood had died exactly 18 months ago. The cancer had taken her slowly, methodically, stripping away pieces of the vibrant woman who had once filled these halls with laughter, music, and the warm scent of her favorite jasmine perfume. She had been the heart of their family, the gentle force that kept her driven husband grounded and their brilliant daughter balanced. Now, in the aftermath of her loss, the penthouse felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Marcus Blackwood, 49, sat in his corner office 60 floors above Wall Street, staring at acquisition reports that swam before his tired eyes. As the founder and CEO of Blackwood Capital Management, he controlled billions in assets, made decisions that affected thousands of jobs, and commanded respect in boardrooms across 3 continents. But when it came to understanding his own daughter, he felt utterly powerless. Seraphina had always been extraordinary. At 17, she possessed an intellect that had intimidated her prep school teachers since childhood. She spoke 4 languages fluently, had been accepted early admission to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and had once been featured in Forbes for her innovative app design that helped children with dyslexia learn to read. She had her mother's compassionate heart and her father's razor-sharp mind. But that was before Victoria's diagnosis. Before 2 years of hospital visits, experimental treatments, and false hopes. Before that terrible February morning when the machines finally went silent and the light went out of Seraphina's eyes forever. The transformation had been devastating to witness. The vibrant, engaged teenager who had once debated politics at dinner and spent weekends volunteering at the Children's Hospital had retreated into herself completely. She barely spoke, rarely left her room, and had become increasingly hostile toward any attempts at connection. The expensive grief counselors spoke about complicated bereavement and adolescent trauma responses, but their clinical terms did nothing to bridge the growing chasm between father and daughter. Marcus had tried everything. He'd arranged for the city's best therapists, enrolled her in exclusive support groups, even offered to take her traveling anywhere in the world. But Seraphina remained unreachable, locked away in her bedroom suite like a princess in a tower, emerging only for the minimum required interactions. The housekeeping staff had started quitting within weeks of taking the position. Seraphina's mood swings and tearful outbursts had driven away even the most experienced domestic workers. Some complained about her rudeness, others whispered about strange sounds coming from her room at odd hours. The longest anyone had lasted was 3 weeks. Until Esperanza Morales arrived. Esperanza, 38, had immigrated to New York from El Salvador 12 years earlier with nothing but hope and an unshakable determination to build a better life for her family. She worked as a housekeeper for wealthy Manhattan families, sending most of her earnings back home to support her elderly parents and younger siblings. Unlike the previous staff, she hadn't been intimidated by Seraphina's reputation. Grief speaks a universal language, she had told Marcus during her interview, her dark eyes filled with quiet wisdom. Sometimes the most broken birds just need someone who understands how to sit still and wait. Esperanza had lost her own teenage daughter, Paloma, in an earthquake 7 years ago. The pain had nearly destroyed her, but it had also taught her something valuable about the landscape of loss. She recognized the signs of a soul in torment. For the first month, Seraphina had treated Esperanza with the same cold hostility she showed everyone else. But Esperanza was patient. She would leave small offerings outside Seraphina's door, not just meals, but little things that showed she was paying attention. A book of poetry by Seraphina's favorite author. A cup of tea made exactly the way Victoria used to prepare it. Sketching pencils when she noticed Seraphina's old drawings scattered on the floor. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. Seraphina stopped slamming her door when Esperanza knocked. She began eating the meals that were left for her. Once, Esperanza had heard her say thank you through the closed door, so softly it might have been imagined. But despite these small improvements, Seraphina remained largely isolated. She had stopped attending her online classes, abandoned her college applications, and showed no interest in the social activities that Marcus desperately tried to arrange. Her old friends had long since given up trying to reach her. Which is why what happened on that gray November Tuesday made no sense at all. Esperanza had been working in the Blackwood penthouse for exactly 10 weeks when she heard the voices. It was 2:30 in the afternoon, the time when she usually brought Seraphina her lunch tray. As she climbed the marble staircase that led to the private wing where Seraphina's bedroom suite was located, she balanced the silver tray carefully in her hands. Today she had prepared chicken soup, homemade, with the special blend of herbs that her own grandmother had taught her was good for healing both body and spirit. But as she approached the heavy oak door that had remained a barrier between Seraphina and the world for so many months, she heard something that made her pause. Voices. Multiple voices. Soft, gentle, unmistakably real. Esperanza stopped on the landing, her heart rate quickening. Marcus was still at the office. She had seen him leave that morning in his usual flurry of phone calls and urgent meetings. The tutors had been dismissed weeks ago when Seraphina refused to attend sessions. No friends had visited in over a year. So who was in there with her? Don't worry, Angel, she heard Seraphina's voice, softer and warmer than it had been in months. The medicine will help you feel better soon. I promise. A smaller voice responded, weak and frightened. Will it hurt? No, sweetheart. I'll be right here with you. We'll sing Mama's song together, okay? Esperanza's hands trembled as she held the tray. The tenderness in Seraphina's voice was heartbreaking. It was the first time in 18 months that she had heard anything but anger or hollow emptiness from the girl. But who was she talking to? Another voice joined in, this one belonging to what sounded like a young boy. Sarah, I'm hungry. When will the food come? Soon, little one. Esperanza always brings lunch at this time. She takes good care of us. Us? Esperanza's mind raced. What did she mean by us? Moving closer to the door, she pressed her ear against the polished wood. The voices continued, at least 3 or 4 different children, all speaking in hushed, careful tones. One was coughing, a deep, concerning sound that seemed to come from someone very small. Another was crying softly, being comforted by Seraphina's gentle shushing. I miss my mama, the crying voice whispered. I know, baby. I miss mine too. But we have each other now, and that's what matters. Family isn't always about blood, sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. Esperanza's breath caught in her throat. These weren't teenagers. These were young children, and they sounded sick, scared, and completely dependent on Seraphina. But how was that possible? How could there be children in Seraphina's room without anyone knowing? Where had they come from? And why did they sound so unwell? Taking a deep breath, Esperanza raised her hand to knock on the door. The voices immediately fell silent. Miss Seraphina, she called gently. I have your lunch. A long pause. Then Seraphina's voice, tight with what sounded like panic, just leave it outside the door, please. I'm not feeling well today. But Esperanza had heard the other voices too clearly to pretend otherwise. More importantly, she had heard something in Seraphina's tone that she recognized, the fierce protectiveness of someone guarding something precious and fragile. Miss Seraphina, she said carefully, I heard voices. Are you okay in there? Another silence, longer this time. Then, barely audible, please, Esperanza. Just leave the food and go. But the desperation in those words told Esperanza everything she needed to know. This wasn't teenage rebellion or a breakdown. This was something else entirely, something that required immediate attention but infinite care. Making a decision that would change everything, Esperanza slowly turned the door handle. To her surprise, it wasn't locked. The door swung open silently, and what Esperanza saw made her drop the silver tray with a crash that echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. The elegant bedroom that had once been Seraphina's private sanctuary had been completely transformed. The designer furniture had been pushed aside to make room for what looked like a makeshift medical ward. Blankets and pillows were arranged on the floor in careful patterns, creating separate sleeping areas. A humidifier ran quietly in the corner, filling the air with moisture. Bottles of children's medicine lined the mahogany dresser like a pharmacy display. And in the center of it all, Seraphina sat cross-legged on the Persian carpet, holding a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child was pale and thin, with dark circles under her enormous brown eyes and a hospital bracelet still attached to her tiny wrist. But she wasn't alone. 3 other children were scattered around the room, a boy around 6 with a leg brace, crutches leaning against the wall beside him, another girl, maybe 5, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit and breathing through a small portable oxygen concentrator, and a toddler, barely 2, sleeping fitfully in a nest of blankets while connected to what looked like a feeding tube. All of them were clearly sick. All of them were looking at Seraphina with the absolute trust and adoration usually reserved for loving parents. And all of them were staring at Esperanza with wide, frightened eyes. "Esperanza," Seraphina whispered, her voice breaking. The defiance that had characterized her behavior for months was gone, replaced by raw vulnerability and desperate fear. "Please. Please don't tell my father. They have nowhere else to go." Esperanza's knees nearly buckled as the full magnitude of what she was seeing hit her. These weren't friends or relatives. These were children who had somehow found their way to Seraphina, children who were sick, alone, and completely dependent on a 17-year-old girl who was supposed to be dealing with her own trauma. The little girl in Seraphina's arms looked up at Esperanza with eyes that held far too much pain for someone so small. "Are you going to make us leave?" she asked in a whisper that could barely be heard above the soft hum of the medical equipment. That's when the tears started. Esperanza sank to her knees on the carpet, her hands flying to her mouth as 18 months of mystery suddenly crystallized into heartbreaking clarity. The sounds the previous housekeepers had complained about. Seraphina's increased food requests. Her sudden interest in medical websites and children's hospitals. The way she had started asking specific questions about insurance coverage and pediatric care. This wasn't teenage rebellion or complicated grief. This was love in its purest, most sacrificial form. "How long?" Esperanza whispered, her voice thick with tears. Seraphina's arms tightened around the little girl protectively. "It started about 6 months after Mama died. I was volunteering at the children's hospital. It was one of the few places where I felt close to her, where the sadness felt useful. That's where I met Luna." She looked down at the child in her arms with infinite tenderness. She was in the oncology ward, and her foster family decided they couldn't handle the medical bills anymore. She was going to be sent to a state facility it wasn't good, Esperanza. They don't have enough staff, enough resources. Children like Luna just disappear there. The boy with the leg brace spoke up, his voice stronger than the others. "Sarah saved me from the bad place. They said I was too expensive to fix. And Marcus's insurance doesn't know about any of this?" Esperanza asked, though she already knew the answer. Seraphina shook her head. "He would call social services immediately. He would think he was doing the right thing, but these children have already been failed by the system. They need specialized care, consistent love, and..." Her voice broke. "They need someone who understands what it feels like to lose everything." Esperanza looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't the chaos of a teenage breakdown, it was the careful organization of someone who had taught herself to provide medical care. Charts hung on the wall tracking medications and symptoms. A small refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner, filled with specialized formula and medications. Books on pediatric nursing were stacked neatly on the nightstand. The food requests, Esperanza said, understanding flooding through her. The extra laundry. The medical questions. I've been using my college fund, Seraphina admitted. And Mama's jewelry. I sold some of it to pay for medications and supplies. I know it's wrong, but I couldn't just watch them suffer when I had the means to help. The little girl, Luna, reached out toward Esperanza with a tiny hand. Miss, are you kind like Sarah? She takes good care of us when we're scared. And that's when Esperanza's heart completely shattered. Because she realized that while Marcus had been desperately trying to fix his daughter's grief, Seraphina had been quietly transforming her pain into purpose. While the world saw a troubled teenager acting out, she had been running a secret sanctuary for children who had been abandoned by everyone else. The millionaire's daughter wasn't hiding a secret addiction or a forbidden relationship. She was hiding her enormous, beautiful, impossible heart. The silence in Seraphina's room stretched like a held breath. Esperanza remained on her knees, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the 4 children who had somehow found sanctuary in this Manhattan penthouse. Each small face told a story of abandonment, illness, and resilience that no child should ever have to write. Please, Seraphina whispered again, her voice barely audible. I know how this looks, but they're not safe anywhere else. The system failed them, Esperanza. All of them. Luna, the tiny girl in Seraphina's arms, reached toward Esperanza with trembling fingers. Are you crying because you're sad for us too? She asked with the heartbreaking directness that only small children possess. Esperanza wiped her eyes and moved closer, her voice gentle. I'm crying because I'm amazed by how much love I see in this room, Pequeña. The boy with the leg brace, who had been watching warily from his corner, spoke up. I'm Gabriel. Sarah says you make the best soup. Are you going to tell the scary man about us? The scary man? Esperanza looked questioningly at Seraphina. My father, Seraphina said quietly. They've heard me on the phone with him. Gabriel is terrified of men in suits, his last foster father. She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Esperanza's heart clenched. She moved slowly around the room, taking in the careful organization that spoke of months of dedicated care. A medication chart hung on the wall with different colored schedules for each child. Medical supplies were neatly arranged in labeled containers. A small kitchen area had been set up with a mini fridge stocked with specialized formulas and soft foods. Tell me their stories, Esperanza said, settling cross-legged on the carpet. All of them. Seraphina's eyes filled with cautious hope. This wasn't the reaction she had expected from an adult discovering her secret. Luna came first, she began, stroking the little girl's thin hair. Stage 2 leukemia. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 2, and she was placed with a foster family who gave her back to the state when the medical bills became too overwhelming. She was going to be transferred to Riverside Children's Facility, a place where kids like her go to die quietly. Luna looked up at Seraphina with absolute trust. Sarah found me crying in the hospital. She said I could live with her and be safe. How did you get her out? Esperanza asked, though she was beginning to understand the scope of what Seraphina had undertaken. I befriended one of the social workers, Helena Rodriguez. She's young, overwhelmed, and heartbroken by how many children fall through the cracks. When I told her I was Victoria Blackwood's daughter and that my family wanted to provide private care for Luna while we arranged proper adoption. Seraphina's voice trailed off. You lied. I bent the truth. I said my family had resources and wanted to help. Technically, that wasn't false. Helena was so relieved to find Luna a safe placement that she expedited the temporary custody paperwork. By the time anyone might have questioned it, Luna was already here and thriving. Esperanza looked at Gabriel, who was methodically organizing a collection of toy cars. And Gabriel? Spina bifida and multiple surgeries, Seraphina explained. He aged out of the adoption system because most families don't want a child with extensive medical needs. He was living in a group home where he was hurt. One of the nurses at the hospital told me about him. Gabriel looked up, his young face serious beyond his years. The big boys there said I was broken and nobody would ever want me. But Sarah said broken things can still be beautiful. The third child, a little girl with an oxygen concentrator, had been quietly coloring but now looked up shyly. "I'm Rosie," she said in a voice made breathy by her condition. "I have bad lungs from when I was born too early. Sarah reads to me every night." "Chronic lung disease," Seraphina explained. "She needs consistent respiratory therapy and monitoring. The state facility couldn't provide the level of care she needed." Finally, there was the sleeping toddler connected to a feeding tube. "And little Miguel has cerebral palsy and a severe feeding disorder. He's only 18 months old. His teenage mother couldn't cope, and the group home couldn't handle his medical complexity." Esperanza was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what she was seeing. For critically ill children, each requiring specialized care, being tended to by a 17-year-old girl who was supposed to be preparing for college. "How do you manage their medical needs?" she asked. Seraphina gestured to a laptop open on her desk. "I've been taking online courses in pediatric nursing. I video call with sympathetic doctors who think I'm a nursing student doing research. Helena checks in regularly and helps me navigate the legal aspects. And I've been using Mama's medical textbooks. She was pre-med before she met Dad. The expenses? Mama left me a trust fund that I can access for educational purposes. Technically, this is educating me." Seraphina's smile was wry. "And I've been selling some of Mama's jewelry, pieces Dad doesn't know about." Esperanza stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline while her mind raced. Below, millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that 43 floors above them, a teenager was running a secret children's hospice with nothing but love and determination. "Seraphina," she said finally, "what you've done is incredible. But you can't continue like this alone. These children need more than you can provide, no matter how much you love them." "I know," Seraphina's voice broke. "Luna needs chemotherapy that I can't arrange privately. Gabriel needs surgery on his spine. Rosie's breathing is getting worse, and Miguel needs specialized equipment that costs more than I have left." Tears began flowing down her cheeks. "But I can't abandon them. I can't let them go back to places where they'll be forgotten." Luna reached up to wipe Seraphina's tears. "Don't cry, Sarah. We're happy here with you." That simple gesture of a sick child comforting her caregiver broke something open in Esperanza's chest. She turned back to the room, her decision crystallizing. "What if," she said slowly, "what if you didn't have to choose between getting them proper help and keeping them safe?" Seraphina looked up, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Your father has resources that could help these children in ways you can't imagine. But more than that, he has connections, people who could create solutions instead of just following inadequate systems." "He would never understand," Seraphina protested. "He thinks everything can be solved with money and proper procedures. He'd call social services and have them taken away immediately." Esperanza moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You're not giving him enough credit. Your father lost your mother too, Mija. He knows what it feels like to watch someone you love suffer and feel powerless to help. And he's been watching you disappear for 18 months, desperate to find a way to bring you back. But these children are going to get the best possible care," Esperanza said with quiet conviction. "But it's going to happen the right way, with full support and legal protection. Trust me." Before Seraphina could protest further, they heard the distinctive sound of the penthouse elevator arriving. Marcus was home early. "He can't see them," Seraphina said, panic rising in her voice. "Not yet. Not like this." "Miss Sarah," Gabriel said quietly, "maybe it's time. Maybe the scary man isn't as scary as we think." Esperanza made a quick decision. "Children, I need you to trust me the way you trust Seraphina. Can you do that?" Four small heads nodded solemnly. "Then stay here with Sarah while I talk to Mr. Marcus. I'm going to tell him the truth, but I'm going to help him understand why what you've all done together is so beautiful." Seraphina grabbed Esperanza's hand. "What if he doesn't understand? What if he takes them away?" Then we'll fight for them together, Esperanza said firmly. But I think you're going to be surprised by your father's heart. Esperanza found Marcus in his study, still in his tailored suit but with his tie loosened and exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Esperanza? Is everything all right? I thought I heard something break upstairs. Mr. Marcus, she said, closing the door behind her. I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to shock you, but I need you to listen with your heart, not just your head. Marcus frowned, setting aside the financial reports he'd been reviewing. Is Seraphina all right? She's more than all right. She's extraordinary. But she needs your help, and so do 4 other children whose lives she's been saving. For the next 20 minutes, Esperanza told Marcus everything. She watched his face cycle through disbelief, shock, anger, concern, and finally, something that looked like awe. She's been caring for 4 sick children? In her bedroom? 4 months? His voice was barely above a whisper. She saved them, Mr. Marcus. Children that the system abandoned. And she's been doing it while grieving her mother and managing her own pain. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I thought I was losing her. I thought the grief had broken her beyond repair. But she was turning her pain into purpose. She needs you now, Esperanza said gently. Not as someone who fixes problems, but as a father who can help her save these children the right way. Marcus stood abruptly. I need to see her. I need to see them. They climbed the stairs together, Marcus's usual confident stride replaced by careful, uncertain steps. At Seraphina's door, Esperanza knocked gently. Seraphina? Your father is here. He knows everything, and he wants to help. The door opened slowly, and Seraphina appeared, her face streaked with tears. Behind her, 4 small faces peered out with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Father and daughter looked at each other for a long moment. Then Marcus did something he hadn't done since Victoria's funeral. He opened his arms. Seraphina collapsed into her father's embrace, 18 months of grief and fear and desperate love pouring out in great, shuddering sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I should have told you, but I couldn't let them suffer. I couldn't just watch them be forgotten. Marcus held her tighter, his own tears falling freely. You have nothing to apologize for. You did something I should have been helping you do all along. You found a way to honor your mother's memory by loving children who needed it most. Over Seraphina's shoulder, Marcus saw Luna watching them with wide eyes. Without hesitation, he knelt down to her level. Hello, sweetheart. I'm Seraphina's father. She's told me how brave you are. Luna studied his face seriously. Are you going to send us away? Never, Marcus said with quiet conviction. We're going to make sure you get the very best care possible, and that you always feel safe and loved. What followed were the most transformative weeks in the Blackwood family's history. Marcus used his considerable resources and connections not to dismantle what Seraphina had built, but to legitimize and expand it. He hired the city's best pediatric specialists, worked with family lawyers to ensure proper guardianship arrangements, and quietly established the Victoria Blackwood Foundation for medically complex children. Helena Rodriguez, the young social worker who had helped Seraphina, became the foundation's director of family services. The penthouse was renovated to include a proper medical suite while maintaining the warm, home-like atmosphere that made the children feel safe. Luna began receiving cutting-edge leukemia treatment from specialists at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Gabriel had his spinal surgery performed by the country's leading pediatric orthopedic surgeon. Rosie received a revolutionary lung treatment that dramatically improved her breathing. And little Miguel was fitted with advanced feeding technology that allowed him to grow stronger every day. But more than the medical interventions, the children thrived because they had something most foster children never experience, a family that fought for them. 6 months later, the Blackwood penthouse had been transformed into something that looked like organized chaos in the best possible way. medical equipment hummed quietly alongside toys scattered across Persian rugs. Seraphina, now officially enrolled in an accelerated nursing program, moved between her studies and caring for her chosen siblings with the confidence of someone who had found her calling. Marcus, who had once worked 18-hour days to avoid coming home to an empty house, now rushed home each evening to help with homework, read bedtime stories, and tuck 4 additional children into bed alongside his daughter. And Esperanza had become the family's anchor, the person who had seen the truth when everyone else was looking in the wrong direction and had the courage to bring it into the light. One evening, as spring painted Central Park in shades of green visible from their windows, the family gathered for dinner. Luna, her hair finally growing back thick and healthy, was excitedly telling everyone about her first day back at school. Gabriel was demonstrating how well he could walk with his new leg braces. Rosie was breathing easily without her oxygen concentrator for the first time in months. And Miguel was feeding himself with proud determination. "You know what Mama would say if she could see us now?" Seraphina asked, looking around the table at her unconventional but perfect family. "What?" Marcus asked, though his eyes were already bright with tears. "She'd say that love multiplies when you share it. That the best way to heal a broken heart is to use it to love someone else's children." As laughter filled the penthouse that had once been silent with grief, Esperanza watched the man who had nearly lost his daughter discover that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the things that scare us most. Marcus had thought his daughter was hiding a shameful secret. Instead, she had been hiding a miracle. And in the end, the millionaire's daughter hadn't just saved 4 forgotten children. She had saved her entire family.